The steel door slammed behind her with a sound Lily had heard every single day for 15 years. But this time it was different. This time she was on the outside. The September morning air hit her face like a slap of freedom she'd almost forgotten existed. Lily Chen stood at the gates of Rockwell State Correctional Facility. 42 years old, wearing donated clothes that didn't quite fit, holding a plastic bag with everything she owned in the world. $37. A warm Bible, and a newspaper clipping she'd kept hidden under her mattress for the last 6 months. She pulled out that clipping now, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the yellowed paper. The headline stared back at her in bold black letters. Judge Richard Chen, nominated for Supreme Court. President calls him a beacon of justice and integrity. Her brother, the man who had put her here, standing on the steps of the Capitol, smiling that perfect smile, shaking hands with senators, being praised as a pillar of the legal system, while she had spent 15 years in a 6x8 cell for a murder she didn't commit. My name is Lily Chen, and I was 27 years old when my own brother sentenced me to life in prison. 27, working 2 jobs, taking night classes to finish my accounting degree, trying to build something real. I had dreams back then. Small dreams, maybe. But they were mine. I wanted to open my own firm. I wanted to help small businesses in our community. I wanted to make my parents proud. Instead, I became inmate 847,362, a convicted murderer. My brother made sure of that. The memory of that day in court still burned like acid. Richard sitting high on that bench in his black robe, looking down at her with those cold eyes. Their mother sobbing in the gallery. The jury reading the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. And Richard, her own flesh and blood, showing no emotion as he sentenced her to life without parole. Miss Chen? A voice pulled her back to the present. A young woman with kind eyes and a tablet stood near a beat-up Honda. I'm Sarah Martinez from the Innocence Justice Project. We've been trying to reach you. Lily stared at her. In prison, you learn not to trust easily. You learned that hope was more dangerous than despair. Why? Lily's voice came out rough. 15 years of minimal conversation did that to you? Because 6 months ago, we received an anonymous package. Evidence in your case. Evidence that was never presented at trial. Sarah's eyes filled with something that looked like anger. Miss Chun, someone set you up. And we think we know who. Of course they did. Lily had known for 6 months, ever since another inmate, a woman named Teresa who was being released, had whispered something to her during rec time. Your brother, Judge Richard Chen, he's dirty. Everyone in the legal system knows it, but nobody can touch him. Too powerful. Too connected. But there are people trying. People collecting evidence. Lily had laughed bitterly at that. Her brother dirty? She'd known that for 15 years. She'd lived it. Get in the car, Sarah said gently. We have a lot to talk about. And not much time. Why not much time? Because your brother's Supreme Court confirmation hearing is in 3 weeks, and certain people want to make sure the truth comes out before he gets that lifetime appointment. Lily looked back at the prison one last time. 15 years of her life. Gone. 15 years of her 20s and 30s, stolen. While Richard climbed higher and higher, built his career on lies and corruption, smiled for cameras, and gave speeches about justice. She got in the car. During the drive to Sarah's office downtown, Lily learned the basics. The Innocence Justice Project had been investigating her case for 8 months. They'd found witnesses who were pressured to lie. Evidence that was suppressed. Documents that showed Richard had personal connections to the real killer. A man named Vincent Shaw who had killed his business partner over money and had somehow convinced Richard to frame Lily for it. Why would he do that? Sarah asked, navigating through traffic. Why would your own brother frame you? Lily knew the answer. She'd had 15 years to figure it out. Because 3 weeks before the murder, our grandmother died and left her house to me. Not to both of us, just to me. That house was worth $2 million, right in the heart of San Francisco. Richard had always expected to inherit it. He'd already made plans to sell it, use the money to fund his political career. But Grandma saw something in him that made her change her will. She saw what he really was, So he had you convicted of murder to get the inheritance? The house went to him once I was in prison. Legally, I couldn't inherit anything while serving a life sentence. He sold it 6 months after my conviction. Used the money exactly like he planned. Every campaign, every expensive suit, every connection he bought, it was all built on money that should have been mine. Built on my stolen life. Sarah's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. That's beyond cruel. That's evil. That's Richard. The office of the Innocence Justice Project was small but organized. Walls covered with photos of exonerated prisoners. Sarah led Lily to a conference room where 3 other people waited. A middle-aged black man in a suit introduced himself as Marcus Webb, a civil rights attorney. A young Asian woman was Amy Liu, an investigative journalist. And an older white man with tired eyes was Detective James Porter, recently retired. Miss Chun, Marcus said, gesturing to a chair. We've been waiting to meet you. Your brother has made a lot of enemies over the years. Prosecutors he's blocked. Defendants he's railroaded. Lawyers he's destroyed. But nobody could touch him because he's smart and he's careful and he has powerful friends. Until now, Amy added, opening a laptop. Because we have something he can't explain away. We have the real killer's confession. Lily's breath caught. Vincent Shaw confessed? Stage 4 cancer, Detective Porter said quietly. 3 months to live. His conscience finally caught up with him. 2 weeks ago, he contacted me privately. I was the original detective on your case, and I always felt something was wrong. Shaw told me everything. How Richard approached him after the murder. How Richard offered to make the case go away if Shaw paid him $500,000. How Richard then decided it would be easier to just pin it on you instead. We have it all on video, Amy said, turning the laptop around. Shaw's full confession. Names, dates, bank transfers, everything. On the screen, a gaunt man with hollow eyes sat in a hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, speaking directly to the camera. My name is Vincent Shaw, and 15 years ago, I killed my business partner, Robert Martinez. Judge Richard Chun helped me cover it up by framing his own sister, Lily Chun. I've lived with this guilt for 15 years, but I won't die with it. This is the truth. Lily watched the video, her hands shaking. This was it. This was proof. This was vindication. But more than that, this was a weapon. We're releasing this video to every major news outlet tomorrow morning, Marcus said. Your brother's confirmation hearing is in 3 weeks. This will destroy him. Why wait until tomorrow? Lily asked, her voice harder than she expected. Why not now? Because we need you to do a press conference first, Amy explained. Your face, your story, your voice. That's what will make this real to people. That's what will make them care. We need you to stand in front of cameras and tell the world what your brother did to you. Lily looked at each of them, these strangers who had fought for her freedom, who had believed in her innocence when everyone else, including her own family, had given up. When? She asked. Tomorrow afternoon. We've already contacted the major networks. CNN, NBC, Fox, all of them. We're calling it a major development in judicial corruption. They'll be there. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prepare to face the world after 15 years of silence. Less than 24 hours before Richard's perfect life started to crumble. There's one more thing, Detective Porter said, his voice careful. Your brother doesn't know Shaw confessed. He doesn't know we have the evidence. As far as Richard knows, he's untouchable. He's going to his confirmation hearing thinking he's won. A slow smile spread across Lily's face. The first real smile she'd had in 15 years. Good, she said. Let's keep it that way. That night, Sarah took Lily to a small apartment the Innocence Justice Project kept for exonerated prisoners. It was modest but clean, a bed with actual sheets. A bathroom with a door that locked from the inside. A kitchen with a refrigerator that actually had food in it. Lily stood in the middle of the living room, overwhelmed by space and silence, and the simple fact that she could walk from one room to another without asking permission. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably celebrating his nomination, probably rehearsing his confirmation hearing testimony, Probably sleeping peacefully in his expensive house, built with her money, built on her ruined life. He had no idea what was coming. And if you're enjoying this story of how justice finally catches up with those who think they're above it, make sure to subscribe to the channel. What Richard also didn't know was that Lily had spent 15 years in prison learning from some of the smartest criminals in the system. Women who had been betrayed, who had been framed, who had been destroyed by powerful men. Women who had taught her that revenge wasn't about anger. It was about patience and planning and making sure that when you finally struck back, there was nowhere for your enemy to hide. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth about Judge Richard Chen. But that was just the beginning. Because Lily had a plan that went far beyond a press conference and a confession video. She had 15 years of rage to satisfy, and she intended to take her time. The morning came too fast. Lily woke at 5 a.m., her body still programmed to prison schedules. For a moment she forgot where she was, and panic seized her chest until she remembered. Free. She was free. She made coffee in the small kitchen, her hands still adjusting to simple tasks that had been denied for so long. The hot cup warmed her palms as she sat by the window, watching the city wake up. In 6 hours, she would face cameras and reporters and tell the world what Richard had done. But first, she needed to remember exactly who her brother had always been. The memories came sharp and clear. Richard, 5 years older, always the golden child. Straight A's, debate team captain, law school at Stanford. Their parents had worshipped him. Every family dinner was about Richard's achievements, Richard's future, Richard's destiny. And Lily? She was the afterthought. The daughter who tried hard, but never quite measured up. She remembered being 17, showing her parents her acceptance letter to UC Berkeley. Her father had barely looked up from his newspaper. That's nice, Lily. Richard just made partner at his firm. 29 years old and already a partner. Can you believe it? She had learned early that nothing she did would ever be enough to compete with Richard's shine. So she stopped trying. She focused on building her own quiet life, her own small dreams. Until Grandma Chen changed everything. Grandma had been different from their parents. She saw Richard for what he was. Ambitious, calculating, cold. 2 months before she died, she had called Lily to her bedside in the hospital. I'm leaving you the house, Grandma had said, her voice weak but firm. Not Richard. Just you. Why? Lily had asked, shocked. Because you have a good heart. Because you'll use it to build something real, not just to feed your ego. And because Richard... She paused, her eyes sad. Richard has your father's sickness. He loves power more than people. He'll do anything to get what he wants. I've seen it in him since he was a boy. Promise me you'll be careful of him, Lily. Promise me. Lily had promised. But she hadn't been careful enough. 3 weeks after Grandma's death, Robert Martinez was murdered in his office. Shot twice in the chest, his safe emptied. Vincent Shaw, his business partner, had reported finding the body. The investigation moved fast. Too fast. Within days, police had arrested Lily. They claimed her fingerprints were on the murder weapon. They claimed witnesses saw her near the office that night. They claimed they found $50,000 in cash hidden in her apartment, money stolen from Martinez's safe. All lies, but backed by evidence that seemed impossible to dispute. Her public defender had been overwhelmed and underpaid. The prosecutor was a rising star who wanted a conviction. And the judge assigned to her case? Her own brother, Richard Chen. She remembered him visiting her in county jail before the trial. The only time he came. He sat across from her in the visiting room, his expression unreadable. This doesn't look good, Lily, he said quietly. I didn't do it, Richard. You know I didn't do it. I've never even held a gun. The evidence says otherwise. Then the evidence is wrong. Or someone planted it. Richard, you have to help me. You're a judge. You have power. I can't do anything. He cut her off. In fact, I shouldn't even be here. It's a conflict of interest for me to be on your case at all. I should recuse myself. Hope had flared in her chest. Yes, recuse yourself. Get someone else to. But I'm not going to. His voice was flat. Because any other judge would be tougher on you. At least with me, You have someone who knows you. Who understands that you made mistakes. That you got involved with the wrong people. I didn't get involved with anyone. I don't even know Robert Martinez. Richard stood up. The trial starts in 2 weeks. I suggest you take whatever deal the prosecutor offers. Because if this goes to trial, Lily, you're going to lose. And I won't be able to protect you. That was the last time he spoke to her as her brother. After that, he was only the judge. A knock on the apartment door pulled Lily back to the present. Sarah stood outside with garment bags and a makeup kit. We need to get you ready, Sarah said, walking in. The press conference is at 2 p.m. Amy wants you looking polished but sympathetic. Wrongly convicted but not broken. I am broken, Lily said quietly. Then we fake it until you believe it yourself. Sarah laid out the clothes. A simple navy dress, modest heels, minimal jewelry. The narrative we're pushing is clear. Innocent woman destroyed by corrupt judge. Sister betrayed by brother. The American justice system failing its own principles. It's not a narrative, it's the truth. I know. But truth needs packaging if you want people to care. By noon, Lily was dressed and rehearsed. Marcus had walked her through potential questions. Amy had shown her how to speak to the camera, not at it. Detective Porter had given her copies of key documents in case reporters asked for proof. Remember, Marcus said as they prepared to leave for the press venue. Richard still doesn't know this is coming. As far as he's aware, you're just another released prisoner. He probably doesn't even know you got out yesterday. But Marcus was wrong. Richard knew. At that exact moment, across the city in his downtown office, Judge Richard Chen sat behind his massive mahogany desk, listening to his chief of staff deliver news that made his blood run cold. Your sister was released yesterday, the young man said nervously. Apparently there's some procedural issue with her conviction. The Innocence Justice Project is involved. Richard's face remained perfectly calm, but his mind was racing. Released on what grounds? That's unclear. But sir, there's a press conference scheduled for today at 2 p.m., multiple news outlets. They're calling it a major announcement about judicial corruption. Richard stood slowly, walking to his floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. After 15 years, he'd almost forgotten about Lily. She'd become just another closed chapter in his rise to power. The house had been sold, the money invested wisely, his career built on that foundation. She was supposed to stay buried. Cancel my afternoon appointments, he said quietly. And get me everything you can find on this press conference. I want to know who's behind it, what evidence they think they have, and how we can discredit it before it goes public. Sir, the confirmation hearing will proceed as planned. Richard's voice was sharp now. My sister is a convicted murderer. Whatever sob story she's selling, whatever lies these activists are pushing, the facts remain. She was convicted by a jury. Evidence was presented. Justice was served. Nothing she says now can change that. But even as he said it, Richard felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Because he knew his sister. Quiet, persistent, intelligent Lily. If she was coming after him, she wouldn't do it without ammunition. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 15 years. Vincent Shaw. The phone rang. And rang. No answer. Richard tried again. Still nothing. A cold sensation spread through his chest. He called his private investigator, a man who handled delicate situations discreetly. Find Vincent Shaw, Richard ordered. I need to know where he is and what he's doing. Today. 2 hours later, the investigator called back. Sir, Vincent Shaw is in hospice care. Stage 4 cancer. He's not expected to make it through the month. Richard's hand tightened on the phone. A dying man had nothing to lose. A dying man might confess. Has anyone contacted him recently? Lawyers? Journalists? I'm checking now, sir. But there were visitors last week. I'm working on getting names. Richard hung up and stared at his reflection in the window. His perfect face, his expensive suit, his corner office with a view that cost more than those people made in a year. Everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed for. He wasn't going to let Lily destroy it. At 1:45 p.m., Lily stood backstage at the press venue, listening to the crowd of reporters gathering beyond the curtain, Her hands were shaking. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this. Just tell the truth." "That's all you need to do." "What if he's there?" Lily asked. "What if Richard shows up?" "Then you look him in the eye," Marcus said firmly. "And you don't back down." At exactly 2 p.m., Lily walked out onto the small stage. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones bristled from every direction. And Lily, who had been silent for 15 years, stepped up to the podium. "My name is Lily Chen," she began, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "And I spent 15 years in prison for a murder I didn't commit. The judge who sentenced me was my brother Richard Chen, the same man who has been nominated to the Supreme Court. And today, I'm here to tell you how he framed me to steal my inheritance and build his career on my destroyed life." The room erupted. Questions came like bullets. But Lily kept talking, kept pushing through, kept exposing every detail. When she finished, Amy stepped forward and played Vincent Shaw's confession video on the large screens behind her. The room fell silent as Shaw's hollow voice filled the space. "Judge Richard Chen helped me cover it up by framing his own sister." When the video ended, chaos. Reporters screaming questions, phones ringing, cameras flashing nonstop. This wasn't just a story. This was a nuclear bomb dropped on the American justice system. Backstage, Lily's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered. "Hello, little sister." Richard's voice was ice. "Congratulations on your moment of fame. But you have no idea what you just started. By tomorrow, I'll have destroyed your credibility so thoroughly that no one will believe anything you say ever again. And when I'm confirmed to the Supreme Court, I'll make sure you regret every word you spoke today." He hung up before she could respond. Lily stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, and smiled. Because Richard had just made his first mistake. He'd threatened her. And in his arrogance, he'd forgotten that she'd learned patience in prison. That she'd learned strategy from women who'd survived worse than him. The press conference was just the opening move. Richard thought he was fighting to protect his nomination. But what he didn't know was that Lily wasn't after his Supreme Court seat. She was after everything he'd ever built. And she was just getting started. The news cycle exploded overnight. By morning, Lily's face was on every major network. Innocent woman framed by brother judge. Supreme Court nominee accused of corruption. Sister's 15-year nightmare exposed. Richards' team went into full damage control. By 10 a.m., his press secretary released a statement calling the allegations baseless attacks from a convicted felon desperate for attention. By noon, Richard himself appeared on cable news, his expression perfectly calibrated between wounded and resolute. "My sister is deeply troubled," he told the camera, his voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. "I love her. Our family loves her." But the evidence in her case was overwhelming. A jury of her peers convicted her. "I simply upheld the law, as painful as that was personally. These conspiracy theories don't change facts." Lily watched the interview from Sarah's office, her face expressionless. Marcus paced behind her, furious. "He's good," Marcus muttered. "Too good. He's positioning himself as the victim here." The noble judge forced to convict his own sister because of his dedication to justice. "Let him," Lily said calmly. "What?" "Let him think he's winning." She turned away from the screen. "We need him confident. We need him to make mistakes." Sarah looked at her curiously. "You're different today. Yesterday you were nervous. Today you're focused." Lily stood up. "Because yesterday was about exposing him. Today is about destroying him. And I need to make a phone call." She pulled out a burner phone she'd bought that morning and dialed a number she'd memorized years ago. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Yeah? It's Lily Chen. I need to see you." Silence. Then, "I'll be damned. Heard you got out. Also heard you're making waves. Can we meet?" Same place as before. 1 hour. Lily hung up and grabbed her jacket. "I'll be back this afternoon." "Where are you going?" Marcus asked. "We have strategy meetings scheduled. The Senate Judiciary Committee wants to talk to you before Richard's hearing. I'm getting insurance. Trust me." She left before anyone could argue. The address took her to a rundown diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place that served weak coffee and asked no questions. Lily slid into a back booth and waited. 20 minutes later, a man in his 60s walked in. Gerald Freeman had been her father's best friend once, before Richard destroyed that relationship too. He'd also been a federal prosecutor for 30 years before retiring in disgust over corruption he couldn't fight. Lily. Gerald sat down heavily, studying her face. 15 years. You look harder. Prison does that. I'm sorry I couldn't help you back then. Your brother had too much power, too many connections. I tried to investigate but got shut down from above. I know. I'm not here about the past. I'm here about the present. She slid a folder across the table. I need you to look at something. Gerald opened it. Inside were documents, bank statements, emails. His eyes widened as he read. Where did you get these? I had help from friends inside. People Richard crossed over the years. Prisoners with access to information. Guards who hated corrupt judges. You'd be surprised how much intelligence you can gather when everyone around you has been screwed by the system. The documents showed something explosive. Richard hadn't just framed Lily. Over the past 15 years, he'd been involved in at least 8 other cases where evidence was suspicious, where defendants were convicted on questionable grounds, where Richard benefited financially or politically from the outcomes. This is a pattern, Gerald breathed. This is systemic corruption, and it gets better. Lily pulled out another folder. 3 of those cases? The defendants are willing to testify. I've been writing letters from prison for 5 years, building relationships, gathering stories. They've been waiting for someone to listen. Gerald looked at her with new respect. You've been planning this for years. Since the day I realized my brother wasn't going to save me. Since I understood that if I wanted justice, I'd have to build it myself. Piece by piece, letter by letter, connection by connection. Why didn't you reach out to me sooner? Because you couldn't have done anything while I was still inside. They would have called me a manipulative criminal trying to get her conviction overturned. But now I'm exonerated. Now I have credibility. And now these other victims can speak without being dismissed as just bitter defendants. Gerald closed the folders carefully. If we present this to the Senate Judiciary Committee, it could derail his confirmation completely. But Lily, your brother has powerful allies. People who benefit from him being on the Supreme Court. They're going to fight dirty. Let them. I've got more. More than this? Lily smiled grimly. Richard made enemies in high places. Federal prosecutors he undermined. FBI agents whose investigations he blocked. And there's one in particular who's been waiting for a chance to take him down. She leaned forward. Do you remember Angela Rodriguez? Gerald's eyes went wide. The FBI agent who was investigating judicial corruption 5 years ago? The same one Richard got transferred to Alaska when she got too close to exposing his network. I've been in contact with her for 3 years. She never stopped investigating. She just went underground. She's been building a case this whole time. A federal case. RICO charges. Conspiracy. Racketeering. She has evidence that Richard is part of a larger corruption ring involving 3 other judges, 2 prosecutors, and a police captain. They've been fixing cases, taking bribes and splitting profits for over a decade. Gerald sat back, stunned. If that's true, we're not just talking about losing a Supreme Court nomination. We're talking about prison time. Exactly. Lily's voice was cold. Richard took 15 years of my life. I'm going to take the rest of his. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Press conference tomorrow 3 p.m. Be ready. A.R. Angela Rodriguez. Right on schedule. Gerald studied Lily's face. You've changed. The girl I knew wouldn't have been capable of this kind of long-game strategy. That girl died in prison. I'm what survived her. Meanwhile, across town, Richard sat in an emergency meeting with his legal team and political advisors. His Senate sponsors were nervous. Polls showed public opinion shifting against him. 3 senators had already publicly questioned whether his confirmation should proceed. We need to shift the narrative, his campaign manager said. Make this about family tragedy, not corruption. Your sister's mental health history. She doesn't have a mental health history, Richard interrupted. Then we create one. Old therapy records can be interpreted differently. Witnesses can remember things. We can paint her as unstable, vindictive, unreliable. Richard's chief of staff nodded. We're also digging into this Vincent Shaw confession. Hospice records show he's on heavy pain medication. Morphine, opioids. His testimony could be dismissed as drug-induced delusions. What about the Innocence Justice Project? Richard asked. Who's funding them? Liberal donors mostly. We can tie them to political opponents. Make this look like a partisan hit job timed to your confirmation. Richard listened as his team strategized, each suggestion more ruthless than the last. This was what he was good at. Taking a crisis and turning it into opportunity. Controlling the narrative. Destroying opponents before they could destroy him. Do it, he ordered. All of it. I want my sister's credibility demolished by tomorrow morning. I want Shaw's confession questioned by legal experts on every network. And I want our Senate allies reassured that this is just noise. After the meeting, Richard's private investigator called with news. Sir, your sister met with Gerald Freeman this afternoon. They talked for over an hour. Richard's blood went cold. Freeman. The one prosecutor who'd tried to investigate him years ago. The one Richard had thought was neutralized. What did they discuss? Unknown. But Freeman left with documents. Looked substantial. Richard ended the call and sat in the darkness of his office, the city lights glittering below like a kingdom he'd built with lies. Lily was smarter than he'd given her credit for. She wasn't just throwing accusations. She was building a case. But so was he, and he'd been playing this game far longer than she had. The next morning, hit pieces on Lily appeared in conservative media. Convicted murderer's revenge plot. Is Lily Chen mentally stable? Anonymous sources claimed she'd been erratic in prison, violent even. Experts questioned whether 15 years behind bars had damaged her credibility. Sarah burst into Lily's apartment, furious. Have you seen these articles? They're destroying you. I've seen them. Lily was calm, almost serene. It's exactly what I expected. How are you not panicking? Because in about 4 hours, none of it will matter. At exactly 3 p.m., FBI Special Agent Angela Rodriguez held a press conference at the federal courthouse. Behind her stood 6 other agents and 2 assistant U.S. attorneys. Today, the FBI is announcing a multi-year investigation into judicial corruption in the Northern District. We have secured indictments against 4 sitting judges, including Judge Richard Chen. The charges include conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. Judge Chen is also being charged specifically with evidence tampering in 8 criminal cases, including the wrongful conviction of his sister Lily Chen. The media erupted. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. As of this morning, Judge Chen's Supreme Court nomination has been formally withdrawn by the White House. Arrest warrants have been issued. Judge Chen has until 5 p.m. today to surrender himself to federal custody. Lily watched the press conference from Gerald's office, surrounded by Marcus, Sarah, and Detective Porter. For the first time in 15 years, she felt something close to satisfaction. How long have you been planning this? Marcus asked, awe in his voice. Since year 3 of my sentence, Lily admitted. When I realized no one was coming to save me. When I understood that Richard had too much power to be taken down through normal channels, so I started building connections. I found other victims. I documented everything. And I waited for the moment when the truth would hurt him most. Her phone rang. Richard. She answered. Put it on speaker. You think you've won. His voice shook with rage. You think this changes anything? I have the best lawyers in the country. I'll fight these charges. I'll be acquitted. And when I am Lily, I will spend every remaining day of my life making sure you suffer. No, Richard, Lily said quietly. You won't. Because there's one thing you still don't know. What's that? I'm not done yet. She hung up. Outside the federal courthouse at 4:47 p.m., Judge Richard Chen arrived in a black SUV, surrounded by lawyers preparing to surrender. News helicopters circled overhead. Hundreds of cameras captured every moment as he walked up the courthouse steps, his face a mask of defiance. But what Richard didn't see, what he couldn't have known, was that Lily stood across the street in a crowd of protesters, watching him. And in her hand was one final piece of evidence she'd been saving for 15 years. Evidence that would turn his trial from difficult to impossible. Evidence that would finally answer the question everyone had been asking. How did a brilliant judge make such a catastrophic mistake? The answer was simple. He hadn't made a mistake. He'd made a choice. And Lily had proof. Tomorrow, she would deliver it personally. But tonight, she let herself feel something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope that justice wasn't just a word. That truth could actually win. That sometimes, the people who destroy you give you exactly what you need to destroy them back. Richard's arraignment was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The federal courthouse was surrounded by media, protesters, and curious onlookers. Inside courtroom 6B, every seat was filled. Cameras weren't allowed, but sketch artists lined the back row, ready to capture history. Lily sat in the front row of the gallery, flanked by Sarah and Marcus. Across the aisle, Richard entered in an expensive suit. His legal team of 4 attorneys surrounding him like a protective wall. He spotted her immediately. For the first time in 15 years, brother and sister locked eyes in a courtroom. But this time, the power dynamic had shifted. Richard's confident mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. Fear. The magistrate judge entered and proceedings began. The charges were read aloud. Conspiracy, bribery, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice. Each count carried years of prison time. Richard stood straight, his jaw clenched, as the prosecutor outlined the government's case. Your Honor, the United States has overwhelming evidence that the defendant engaged in a systematic pattern of corruption spanning 15 years. We have bank records showing payments from defendants to offshore accounts controlled by Judge Chen. We have communications between the defendant and co-conspirators. And we have testimony from victims whose lives were destroyed by his abuse of power. Richard's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Thompson who charged $1,000 an hour, stood up smoothly. Your Honor, these allegations are entirely circumstantial. My client has served on the bench with distinction for 2 decades. This prosecution is politically motivated, timed deliberately to a Supreme Court nomination, which he no longer has, the prosecutor interrupted. Because even the president recognized what the evidence showed. The judge banged his gavel. Counselors, save it for trial. He looked at Richard. Mr. Chen, how do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. Richard's voice was steady, but Lily saw his hands shaking slightly. Bail is set at $5 million. Surrender your passport. GPS monitoring. No contact with co-defendants or witnesses. The gavel came down. Next court date in 30 days. Richard's team posted bail within 2 hours, but as he left the courthouse through a side entrance, trying to avoid cameras, his phone was already exploding with consequences. His law firm had placed him on immediate suspension. The California Bar Association announced an ethics investigation. Former allies in the Senate released carefully worded statements distancing themselves. His wife, Catherine, a woman he'd married for political connections rather than love, had her attorney deliver divorce papers before he even made it home. By evening, Richard sat alone in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by luxury he could no longer afford once the legal bills started piling up. He poured himself scotch with shaking hands and tried to understand how everything had collapsed so completely. His phone rang. An unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. You're probably wondering how we got all that evidence. Lily's voice was calm, almost gentle. Bank records. Communications. Offshore accounts you thought were hidden. How did you? Vincent Shaw wasn't the only one who kept records, Richard. Turns out, when you betray people, when you threaten them, when you force them into illegal activities, some of them keep insurance. One of your co-conspirators started recording conversations 8 years ago. Every phone call, every meeting, every bribe negotiation. And when the FBI approached him with immunity, he handed over everything. Richard's scotch glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. But that's not why I'm calling, Lily continued. I'm calling because tomorrow the Senate Judiciary Committee is holding a hearing. Not about your nomination anymore, about judicial corruption. And I'm testifying. Along with 6 other people you destroyed. We're going to tell our stories. On national television. Under oath. Lily, please. His voice cracked. I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother the day you looked me in the eyes and sentenced me to life in prison for a crime you knew I didn't commit. Her voice hardened. Tomorrow, the world learns exactly who you are. Sleep well, Richard. She hung up. Richard stood in his destroyed living room, glass crunching under his shoes, and felt something he'd inflicted on countless others but never experienced himself. Complete powerlessness. The Senate hearing the next day was broadcast live on C-SPAN and picked up by every major network. Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the Judiciary Committee, sat at the center of the raised bench, flanked by 12 other senators. This hearing is called to examine allegations of systemic corruption in our federal judiciary. She began. We will hear from victims whose lives were destroyed by judges who betrayed their oaths. Our first witness is Ms. Lily Chun. Lily walked to the witness table, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat down, faced the cameras, and began. 15 years ago, my brother sentenced me to life in prison. I was 27 years old. I had no criminal record. The evidence against me was entirely manufactured. But Richard needed me gone because our grandmother had left me a house worth $2 million. Money he wanted. Money he felt entitled to. So he conspired with a murderer to frame me, and then he used his position as a judge to make sure I was convicted. She spoke for 20 minutes. Every detail. Every betrayal. Every night in that cell knowing her own brother had put her there. Senators asked questions. She answered each one clearly, producing documents, pointing to evidence. Then came the moment she'd been waiting for. Ms. Chun, Senator Morrison said, you've made serious allegations, but your brother's defenders claim you're simply a bitter ex-convict seeking revenge. How do you respond? Lily reached into her folder and pulled out a single envelope. Senator, I'd like to enter into the record a letter written by Richard Chun to Vincent Shaw 3 days after my arrest. A letter I obtained through Shaw's attorney after his death last month. She slid it across to the committee clerk, who projected it onto the screens behind her. The entire room fell silent as people read Richard's handwriting. Vincent, everything went perfectly. Lily's prints on the gun, the cash in her apartment, the witness statements, all untraceable back to us. Once she's convicted, the house transfers to me as next of kin. I'll have the money I need for my Senate campaign. You'll have your murder charge disappear. Everyone wins. Well, almost everyone. Burn this letter. R. The explosion of noise in the hearing room was deafening. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Senators conferred urgently with staffers. Senator Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in this chamber. Lily sat calmly while chaos erupted around her. This was the evidence she'd been holding back. The smoking gun. Shaw's attorney had given it to her weeks ago with a note. He wanted you to have this. Said it was his final act of redemption. Richard watched the hearing from his attorney's office, his face ashen. Thompson muted the television and turned to him slowly. Tell me that letter is fake. Richard couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process that the one piece of evidence he'd told Shaw to destroy had survived 15 years. Richard. Tell me it's fake. It's not fake. The words came out as a whisper. Thompson stood up, gathering his files. Then I can't represent you anymore. That letter is a confession to conspiracy and murder for hire. With your handwriting authenticated, you're looking at life in federal prison. Find another attorney. He left. And Richard sat alone in the conference room, watching his sister on television, watching her destroy him with his own words. By evening, the other co-conspirators had begun negotiating plea deals, each one offering testimony against Richard in exchange for reduced sentences. His assets were frozen pending civil forfeiture. His name was stripped from the community center he'd donated to years ago. Former friends and colleagues released statements condemning him. The district attorney announced that Richard would face additional state charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, evidence tampering, and abuse of power. Combined with federal charges, he was facing 70 years minimum. Angela Rodriguez held another press conference. Judge Chen's pattern of corruption has resulted in at least 15 wrongful convictions we've identified so far. We're reviewing hundreds of cases he presided over. This may be the largest judicial corruption scandal in American history. That night, Lily returned to her apartment exhausted but satisfied. Sarah and Marcus had taken her to dinner to celebrate, but she'd felt hollow. Revenge, she realized, wasn't as sweet as she'd imagined. It was just necessary. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You destroyed me. Are you happy now? Richard." Using a burner phone, probably. She typed back, "I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself 15 years ago when you chose ambition over family. I just made sure everyone else finally saw what I've always known. That behind your expensive suits and perfect smile, you're nothing but a coward who sends innocent people to prison to fund your ego." His response came quickly. "I'm your brother. How can you do this to family?" Lily stared at that message for a long time. Then she typed her final words to him. "You stopped being my brother the moment you banged that gavel. Now you'll learn what I learned in that cell. That justice delayed isn't justice denied. It's just justice waiting for the right moment to strike. Goodbye, Richard." She blocked the number. Then she opened her laptop and began writing. Marcus had suggested she write a book about her experience. "People need to hear this story," he'd said. "Other victims need to know they're not alone." So she started with the truth. "My name is Lily Chen. My brother destroyed my life. This is how I took it back. If this story of justice finally served resonates with you, remember that truth always finds its way to the light. Subscribe to see how this ends." 3 weeks later, Richard's trial began. It lasted 8 days. The evidence was overwhelming. 17 witnesses testified against him. Bank records showed millions in bribes. Recordings played his voice negotiating deals. And that letter, his handwritten confession, was displayed for the jury on a screen so large there was no way to miss it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Lily was there for the verdict. She watched Richard's face crumble as the forewoman read count after count. Guilty. 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 At sentencing 2 months later, the judge showed no mercy. "Mr. Chun, you were given power to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. Instead, you became the very thing you swore to fight. You betrayed your oath, your office, and your own family. I sentence you to 45 years in federal prison, to be served consecutively with any state sentences. 45 years. Richard was 52 years old. He would die in prison." As marshals led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at Lily one final time. She met his eyes steadily. Her expression neutral. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Just watched him shuffle away in chains, heading to the same kind of cell where she'd spent 15 years. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Lily with questions, but she made a brief statement and nothing more. "Today, justice was served. Not just for me, but for every person Richard Chen harmed during his career. I hope this sends a message that no one is above the law. Not judges. Not powerful people. No one. And to anyone out there who's fighting against a corrupt system, who thinks they're powerless, who believes their voice doesn't matter, keep fighting. The truth is stronger than lies. Always." 1 year after Richard's sentencing, Lily stood in the lobby of a downtown hotel, adjusting her microphone before walking onto a stage. Outside, a banner read, "National Conference on Wrongful Convictions, Keynote Speaker, Lily Chen." The ballroom held 300 people. Exonerated prisoners, defense attorneys, activists, journalists, people who understood that the justice system could be both salvation and weapon, depending on who wielded it. Sarah stood backstage with her. "Nervous? Always. But not the same way I used to be." Lily walked out to applause. She looked different now. Stronger. Her hair was styled. She wore professional attire that actually fit. But more than the external changes, something fundamental had shifted in her eyes. The fear was gone. What remained was purpose. A year ago, I stood in a different kind of room, she began. A Senate hearing chamber, telling the world how my brother framed me for murder. Today, I'm here to talk about what came after. Because revenge, as satisfying as it feels in the moment, isn't the end of the story. Rebuilding is. She spoke for 40 minutes about the legal reforms needed to prevent corrupt judges. About the importance of independent oversight. About how 15 years in prison had taught her that the system only worked when people refused to accept injustice silently. After her speech, a young black woman approached during the reception. Miss Chen, my name is Denise Patterson. My father was convicted in a case Judge Chen presided over 12 years ago. After your testimony, they reopened his case. Last month he was exonerated. He's home now. Because of you. Lily hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. This happened often now. People whose lives had been touched by Richard's corruption, finding justice after decades of waiting. Angela Rodriguez had told her the final count, 23 wrongful convictions connected to Richard's corruption. 23 people whose cases were being reviewed. 17 had already been exonerated. 6 more were pending. 23 stolen lives. But at least now they had a chance to rebuild. Lily's book, The Weight of the Gavel, had been published 6 months earlier. It spent 14 weeks on the bestseller list. The proceeds went to the Innocence Justice Project and to a legal fund she'd established for other victims of judicial corruption. She'd also sued Richard's estate in civil court for the inheritance he'd stolen. The case was settled quickly. The judge awarded her $4 million, the original $2 million plus interest and damages. Lily used half to buy a small house in the same neighborhood where she'd grown up. The other half went to establishing a nonprofit that provided housing and job training for recently exonerated prisoners. You're doing too much, Tasha had told her during a recent visit. Tasha, who'd become the nonprofit's operations director, managing the programs with the same fierce loyalty she'd shown Lily for years. I spent 15 years doing nothing, Lily had replied. I have time to make up for. Gerald Freeman, now an advisor to her nonprofit, often reminded her to rest. But Lily found that staying busy kept the nightmares away. Most nights she slept peacefully. But sometimes she woke up thinking she was back in that cell, hearing steel doors slam. Trauma, her therapist explained, didn't disappear just because justice was served. It lingered. But it could be managed, channeled, transformed into something useful. 6 months into his sentence, Richard had tried to appeal. His new attorney argued procedural errors, claimed the confession letter should have been excluded, insisted the prosecution had been tainted by media coverage. Every argument failed. The conviction stood. Lily received updates from Angela occasionally. Richard was housed in a medium-security federal prison in Pennsylvania. No special treatment. No protection because of his former status. Just another inmate in khaki scrubs, learning what it meant to live in a cage. He tried to run a legal practice from inside. Angela had told her with dark amusement. Offering advice to other prisoners. The warden shut it down. Turns out, disbarred judges don't get to play lawyer in prison. Lily didn't take pleasure in his suffering. She'd learned that vindictiveness hollowed you out from the inside. But she did feel satisfied knowing that Richard finally understood what he'd done to her. That every morning when he woke up to a concrete cell, he thought about the 15 years she'd lost. That justice, delayed but not denied, had finally balanced the scales. Marcus visited her office one afternoon with news. 3 more judges from Richard's network just took plea deals. The investigation keeps expanding. The FBI thinks this corruption ring might involve up to 12 judges across 4 states. How did it stay hidden so long? Because people like Richard are smart. They only take cases where the defendants are vulnerable. Poor. Minority. People without resources to fight back. People the system already views as disposable. Marcus paused. That's why your story matters, Lily. You weren't supposed to fight back. You weren't supposed to have the patience, or the intelligence, or the support to build a case against him. Richard underestimated you because he never really saw you. He saw what he wanted to see. The little sister who never measured up. And that arrogance destroyed him. Later that week, Lily received a letter. Not unusual, she got correspondence daily from people inspired by her story. But this one made her pause. The return address was Rockwell State Correctional Facility, her old prison. She opened it carefully. Inside was a note from Dorothy, the kind older woman who'd worked as a server at Richard's wedding, who'd later visited Lily in prison, bringing books and encouragement. Dear Lily, I wanted you to know that we all followed your case. Every woman in this place who ever met you, who ever heard your story. We watched you take down that judge. You showed us that even when the system crushes you, you can rise up and crush it back. You're a hero here. Don't forget where you came from, but don't let it define where you're going. With love, Dorothy. Lily folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box where she kept meaningful correspondence. Reminders that her fight hadn't just been about revenge. It had been about showing other victims that resistance was possible. On the 1-year anniversary of Richard's conviction, Lily did something she'd been avoiding. She went to visit her parents. They lived in the same house where she'd grown up, smaller now than she remembered. Her mother answered the door, her face aged by grief and shame. Behind her, Lily's father sat in his armchair staring at nothing. Lily, her mother's voice cracked. You came. I came to tell you both something. Lily stayed on the porch. She wasn't ready to go inside. I forgive you for not believing me. For choosing Richard over me. For letting me rot in prison while you supported him. I forgive you because holding on to that anger was killing me. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. Her mother wiped tears from her eyes. We were wrong. We know that now. We should have. You should have believed your daughter when she said she was innocent. You should have questioned why your son was so eager to convict his own sister. You should have seen the cruelty in him that Grandma saw. Lily's voice was steady. But you didn't. And I spent 15 years paying for his sins while you celebrated his success. So, yes, I forgive you. But I don't forget. And I don't know if we can ever be family again. She left before they could respond. Some wounds, she'd learned, never fully healed. You just learn to live with the scars. 2 years after Richard's conviction, Lily received notice that he'd requested a compassionate release due to health issues. Heart problems, his attorney claimed. He was only serving year 3 of his 45-year sentence. The prosecution opposed it. So did Lily, in a written statement to the judge. Richard Chen showed no compassion when he framed me for murder. He showed no compassion to the 23 other victims whose lives he destroyed. He chose ambition over humanity again and again. Now he asks for mercy he never granted others. I ask the court to remember that justice means accountability. Richard's health issues don't erase his crimes. They're simply consequences of the stress that comes from finally being held responsible. Deny his request. The judge denied the request. Richard would serve his full sentence. 5 years after walking out of prison, Lily stood at a groundbreaking ceremony for the new headquarters of her nonprofit. The building would house legal services, job training, counseling, and transitional housing for the wrongfully convicted. Senator Morrison attended, along with Angela Rodriguez, Gerald Freeman, and dozens of exonerated prisoners whose cases had been reopened because of the reforms sparked by Richard's exposure. This building stands as proof that corruption doesn't win, Lily said to the crowd. That patient, strategic resistance can dismantle even the most powerful systems of injustice. My brother tried to bury me. Instead, he gave me a purpose. He thought he was ending my story. He was actually just beginning it. That night, alone in her house, Lily opened her laptop and checked her email. Among the usual messages was one from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "From an old enemy." She almost deleted it. But curiosity won. She opened it. "Lily, it's Richard. I'm using a prison email system. They monitor everything, so I'll be brief. You were right. About everything. I let ambition destroy my humanity. I hurt people who trusted me. I destroyed you because I couldn't stand that Grandma chose you over me. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of love, and in the process, I became unworthy of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth after all these years. Your brother, Richard." Lily read it twice. Then she closed the laptop without responding. Some apologies came too late. Some damage couldn't be repaired with words. But she did feel something shift inside her. A final letting go of the rage she carried for so long. Richard's apology didn't change the past. It didn't give her back 15 years. But it confirmed what she'd always known. That truth had power. That patience could outlast cruelty. That even people who seemed invincible could be brought down when their victims refused to stay silent. She walked to her window and looked out at the city lights, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal. The survival. The slow, deliberate building of a case that took years to complete. The victory that came not from rage, but from strategy. And she thought about all the people still fighting similar battles. Still trapped in corrupt systems. Still waiting for someone to believe them. Still hoping that justice was more than just a word. Lily's story had become their story. Her victory. A roadmap for their resistance. She picked up her phone and recorded a voice message for the podcast she now hosted weekly. My name is Lily Chen. 15 years ago, my brother tried to erase me from existence. Today, I'm here to tell you that the people who try to destroy you often end up giving you the exact tools you need to destroy them back. But revenge isn't the goal. Justice is. And justice requires patience, planning, and the unshakable belief that truth is more powerful than lies, no matter how long it takes. No matter how impossible it seems. Keep fighting. The truth always finds its way out. She posted the message, knowing it would reach thousands of people who needed to hear it. Then she closed her laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in 20 years, Lily Chen slept without nightmares, without fear, without the weight of injustice crushing her chest. She slept the sleep of someone who'd fought the longest battle of her life and won. Not because she was stronger than her enemy, but because she refused to let him have the last word. And in that refusal, she'd found something more valuable than revenge. She'd found purpose, community, peace. Richard had tried to end her story. Instead, he'd given her the beginning of a better one. If this journey from victim to victor inspired you, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe. Because every voice that joins this conversation makes the next fight for justice a little bit easier.